When your point guard is Steph Curry, and then he comes out the game, Chris Paul is your next guy in, ooh.
Tonight was the first game of his entire career. He didn't start.
1,366 straight games. Different, but at the end of the day, it's basketball.
Something very significant happened for the Golden State Warriors during their last game against the Houston Rockets. It's something that could have, without a doubt, ended their season. As a matter of fact, this is the very thing that ruined their season last year. And fortunately, it happened to be the thing that could potentially result in them winning another NBA championship this season. So before we get to the content, just a brief announcement. My channel members are now going to get early access to some of my content. Now, I want you guys to know, this isn't content that's like breaking news, for instance. Like if a trade just happens, everyone's gonna get that immediately. Rather, there are times where I make videos the night before, it's done at like 11 p.m. my time, and then I'll just schedule it for 6 a.m. the very next morning, or 7 a.m. the next morning. That's when it will hit your feed in a timely manner. So if you happen to be one of those guys that just want the content immediately the moment it's done, then just join my channel memberships program. I think it's like $2, I believe, and you'll get early access. Now that we get all that out of the way, cue the intro. Leading up to the season, I spammed predictions at you guys consistently. Michael Porter Jr. needed over 5.5 rebounds in his season debut. Tyreek Hill just needed a touchdown, and Steph Curry just needed 1 point. Shout out to those that tailed. For those of you guys that were able to make money, we're giving away our picks for free all season long for the NBA and NFL on my Instagram at TheFlightMike. And right now, when you use promo code microphone on Prize Picks, they'll match your deposit up until $100. Thank you, Prize Picks, for the sponsor. Mic check 1 2 1 2. What's going on, everybody? At this point, everybody knows last season there was one particular reason why the Golden State Warriors fell significantly shorter than their expectations. As a matter of fact, from the very beginning of the season, Draymond Green punched the living shit out of his teammate Jordan Poole. This is a guy that was without a doubt the X factor for the Golden State Warriors, a huge reason why they won their championship in 2022. And that's something that the Golden State Warriors had to deal with all season long. All of a sudden, something just seemed a little off. Yes, some of the Golden State Warriors' depth was diminished last year, but whenever you have to go to work and face the man that punched you in the face each and every day, and at the same time, you have the looming threat of your general manager that constructed this roster that won multiple championships, potentially leaving, when you have one of your core pieces whose contract is set to expire at the end of the year, and then the very next year, another core piece whose contract is set to expire by the end of the year, there's going to be a ton of distractions, and the chances of you repeating are slim to none. The Warriors had a choice to make this past offseason. They had to choose between their youth, which is Jordan Poole, or one of their future Hall of Famers that, without a doubt, was a focal piece to them winning championships. And for those of you guys that happen to be Draymond Green haters, remember, if Draymond Green didn't get suspended during the 2016 NBA Finals, I'm pretty sure LeBron James would have one less championship. And I don't think that's a bold statement at all whatsoever. Not to discredit one of the most incredible achievements in NBA history, but you have to admit, losing a core fundamental defensive piece of that Warriors team in his prime year, his best year as a Golden State Warrior, definitely had an effect on the Warriors and swung the momentum to the Cleveland Cavaliers side. Now, that being said, the Golden State Warriors made their choice, trading Jordan Poole for a package centered around Chris Paul, becoming significantly older in the process, and bringing in another guy that Draymond Green just simply didn't like. Because remember, Draymond Green said this about Chris Paul: I hated him. On a scale of 1 to 10, I hated him at an 11. I hated him. 11. But I think that's also a sign of respect. Talking on both ends of the floor, working the referees, working our coach, and working players in the middle of every tussle, battling, elbowing, nasty. Of course you're gonna hate him as an opponent, and if you don't, guess what? You'll lose to him. We've seen a bunch of guys lose to him as well. But regardless, this was enough for Draymond Green to decide that he was going to sign a 4-year, $100 million contract extension with the Golden State Warriors. A huge pay cut, by the way, just to remain with the Golden State Warriors. Now, but that wouldn't be the only thing that would have Golden State Warriors fans concerned. Chris Paul didn't exactly sound eager to start coming off of the bench, saying this.
Okay, well, I don't know what the situation is going to be yet, you know what I mean? So I think that'll be for us to figure out once we get going.
You've never come off the bench in your entire career. Is that something that you'd be willing to do?
Like I said, it'll be a conversation for us when camp starts or whatnot. But me and Steve have talked or whatnot. But that ain't something that you be like, "What up, man? Where you starting? You coming up?" You know what I mean? So I think we'll figure all that stuff out in camp.
Now, as the offseason continued, it seemed like Steve Kerr was stirring the pot in regards to how the Golden State Warriors lineup is going to look like, even proposing that Klay Thompson was going to defend opposing power forwards.
Klay, if we play that lineup that I talked about Saturday to start, which I'm anticipating doing, as I said, barring injury, Klay would guard the format. That's he's so physically strong. He's so used to guarding post-up players after switches. So we're thinking Klay can guard as a 4 this year. We're going to put him in coverage, where he's having to defend pick and roll as a 4. That would be a different job for him. But we're planning on doing some of that and seeing how he does.
Well, the season would officially start, and in the beginning of the season, Draymond Green was out with an injury. So as a result, the Golden State Warriors put out a lineup of Chris Paul, Steph Curry, Andrew Wiggins, Klay Thompson, and Kevon Looney. But now Draymond Green is back, which obviously opens up an uncomfortable conversation. Chris Paul had a record of 1,363 straight games started, never coming off of the bench in his career, not even to rehabilitate an injury. And the Golden State Warriors officially decided that had to be snapped with Draymond Green's return to the roster. Now, we actually got an inside look as to how this conversation went down, according to Anthony Slater. In the days leading up to training camp, Golden State Warriors coach Steve Kerr called his 6 best players into his office for a conversation that Steph Curry specifically referenced late Sunday night in Houston. The attendees were Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, Andrew Wiggins, Draymond Green, Kevon Looney, and Chris Paul. The discussion was of high importance to Kerr. Previous Warriors season was derailed in part due to internal splintering. It began with the preseason punch, but never subsided because of continued grumbling about playing time, certain roles, and a shifting pecking order. Kerr and Curry were determined to avoid a repeat, and this all culminates into the one storyline that we were all discussing over the offseason. It's something that without a doubt could be the difference between a Larry O'Brien trophy or falling significantly shorter of expectations. And that's who is going to come off the bench now that Draymond Green is back and the Warriors are fully healthy. Who starts? Who closes? It depends on the night. Everyone would presumably have a moment of sacrifice, but this was a message most directed at Chris Paul. He was a newcomer with an extensive resume that included one amazing statistic: 1,365 consecutive starts to begin his 19-year career. The streak, longer than any other NBA player in the last 50 years, was snapped Sunday night in Houston. It was agreed upon during a morning conversation at the team's hotel 10 minutes out of downtown. Green was returning from a 2-game absence. Kerr approached Paul and told him that Green's return meant Paul was shifting to the bench. And his reaction is incredible. He didn't really pout or complain. His reaction was actually quite the opposite. He just said, "Yup," nodded his head, "Let's go get him." I think Chris Paul needed some time to really internalize this information that, look, you're a Hall of Famer, and look, you definitely are capable of starting, but I think it's for the best of the team and the best of Chris Paul to come off of the bench. Now, again, I think Chris Paul is more than capable of starting, and I have a tremendous amount of respect for Chris Paul's career, Chris Paul's abilities as a businessman. That contract extension he signed with the Phoenix Suns at the age of 36 was insane for his age, and Chris Paul's longevity. We talk about LeBron James's longevity. Chris Paul's longevity is very impressive. But if you look at LeBron James, even LeBron James this year at his age is playing on a minutes restriction. At a specific point, if you want to continue extending the amount of time you're playing in the NBA, you have to think about the amount of minutes you're logging in on a night-to-night basis. And there's no question in my mind, Chris Paul has been playing an impressive amount of minutes in his late 30s. I mean, he really hasn't ever played less than 30 minutes per game in the entirety of his career. And for the most part, he's been as efficient as ever. He's been the floor general that all of his teams have expected him to be. So to go from that to playing for the Golden State Warriors is definitely a bit of a shock for him. But if we watched how he did in his debut off of the bench, it was without a doubt the best thing that could have happened to the Warriors. The Warriors' main problem is typically what do they do when Steph Curry goes to the bench. So having Chris Paul coming out as the second unit catalyst is exactly what this team needed. A good example was Steph Curry left the game earlier when the Golden State Warriors were trailing by 3, 18-15, but when he returned, the Warriors were up 39-26, which means they went up 16 points over 8.5 minutes, and Chris Paul was plus 22. Draymond Green even had to say they were the much better unit this game. There's no doubt about it. Chris is right at the forefront of that. When you're talking about replacing Steph Curry with Chris Paul, it doesn't get much better than that. You're taking your starting point guard out, and then the next point guard is Chris Paul. That's incredible. We will have that advantage all year long. Even Chris Paul said wonderful things about it, saying it works. It gives us a bigger lineup. I've never been on a team probably with this type of depth. I've been on really good teams, don't get it twisted, but not necessarily where you could say all these guys can start. And I think last year, that was the best starting five in this league. Chris Paul even had this to say about his statement in July about coming off of the bench. It was over exaggerated because I'll tell you this, it wasn't a question. She made a statement. I know what the media is like. I know what I said in there. I know what bullet points are going to be taken away from that. When I went to OKC, what did everyone say? He wanted to be traded. He wants out of there. People always speaking for me. The very first meeting I had in OKC, did I tell you what happened? I stood up in front of my teammates and said, don't pay attention to what the media says about me trying to get moved out of here. I don't know how to be half in and half out. I'm here. When I went to Houston, what did they say? They said, you and James Harden won't work. What about in Phoenix? Well, we're too young. But what I've had to do my entire career is I've had to stand on who I am. I'm not saying this Warriors team is the best team ever, but as soon as the trade happened, what did everyone say? This isn't gonna work. Now look, the season is so young. I could already imagine a bunch of the comments in this video is gonna say,
Mike, it's still very young in the regular season. You're overreacting.
Well, the main reason I'm making this video is the blueprint is very clear at this point. Chris Paul can extend his career potentially into his 40s if he just buys into this role, especially if he decides to take a smaller contract following this. Andre Iguodala got his very first NBA championship and won NBA Finals MVP by agreeing to come off of the bench for the Golden State Warriors during that dynasty's first championship run. Chris Paul could very well do the same here, and by deciding to come off the bench, he's going to play significantly less minutes. His impact on the court is going to be significantly greater, as we saw in the Houston Rockets game, and it could also extend Steph Curry's career because the Golden State Warriors don't need to depend on Steph Curry nearly as much. So let me know in the comment section down below, what do you guys think? Do you think this could save the Golden State Warriors? I'd like to hear what you have to say. Aside from that, I'm your boy Mike. I'm dropping our mic until our next upload.